Hi guys, this will be the writing lecture video. So go to modules on Canvas, and if you look, it says writing information. So open up the writing checklist and I'll go through that and I'll explain some things, and then we'll look at my sample paper. So the first portion of the writing checklist is just the checklist itself. So as you're writing, or when you're finished writing, you can go through and check off each of these points, and they need to all be there or your grade will go down for all the parts that are missing. Okay? Now, scroll below that, and I have an explanation of each of the different points. So the first part, as you'll see, is the introduction, and your paper needs to have an introduction. That should be the first paragraph. Introductions are always funneled. That's the word that's typically used to describe an introduction. A funnel is shaped like this, right? You use a funnel to pour oil into your car or what have you. So, figuratively speaking, your introduction should take this kind of shape. That idea is that you begin with a broad, big, almost vague idea, and you get more and more specific. Each sentence in the introduction gets more and more specific until you get to the most specific point of the introduction, which is the thesis statement, which needs to be your last statement in the introduction. Do make sure that it is the last sentence in the introduction. It should really only be one sentence long. If you're in graduate school or something, then it would probably be, your thesis would be a paragraph long. It will be complex. But you're not in graduate school, so don't do that. It needs to be one sentence. It needs to be clear and concise and direct. It should be, in fact, a direct response to the paper topic itself. So, email me potential thesis statements if you're worried about what yours looks like, because I'm very particular about it. In fact, I'm very particular about writing in general, so I expect it to be stellar at the college level. I'm giving you all of this help so that it can be stellar, so that you can improve and become excellent writers. I will know if you didn't try, and I am not afraid to hand out F's and D's. A lot of people don't hand out F's and D's for poor writing, and there are a number of reasons why. One of which is that it takes a lot longer to give somebody an F or a D, because a student wants justification. Why did I receive this grade? Which means that I have to spend about 15 minutes per paper, if they're low grades like that, putting in all kinds of comments why you deserve to have this grade. If I give out A's and B's for whatever reason, students don't want justification for that. You put 3 comments on their total, and you put an A on the bottom and say, good job, and they just say, whatever, I don't know what I did right, but I don't care because I got a good grade. So I can take about 2 minutes a paper if I give everybody an A and a B. And when teachers at the college level, and especially below the college level, have 400 students and they're crazy because they're in middle school or high school or what have you, they don't want to take all of that time. And they have to be in class 8 straight hours a day with 14-year-olds, which I can't even imagine. I have no idea what that's like, and I don't ever want to know. So I would imagine that they just want to slap an A on there and be done with it and have them out of their hair. I have the luxury of not having to deal with that kind of nonsense. And I also have the principle that you shouldn't be getting a college degree if you can't write. So I will be very difficult on your writing. I will hold you to a high standard, I will hold you to a college level standard. It's not a high standard. Just because nobody else bothers to hold it does not mean that it's a high standard. I do hold it, and I will hold you to it, and I will fail you if you do not follow these techniques. These are the appropriate techniques when writing in the humanities. I can write an A paper in no time on any topic because my writing is so particular, the technique is so refined that I don't write non-A plus papers when I was a student. I just didn't write them. And it didn't even matter if I spent a little bit less time. My technique is so perfect, my organization is so perfect that teachers said, oh my God, it's bam, bam, bam. She understands each one of the points. They follow in a logical order. It's clear. It's insightful. This is amazing. It's perfect. If you can master this technique, I promise you, you will never get anything lower than an A on any writing assignment in any class ever unless you have the content completely incorrect. But your technique, your organization, will be stellar. And I expect to see that by the end of the course. So pay close attention to this. And if you don't funnel your introduction, if you don't have a thesis that's one sentence long, at the end of the introduction, a direct response to the paper topic, I will knock you down a full letter grade. If you don't do what's supposed to be done in a conclusion, I will knock you down a full letter grade. If you don't provide topic sentences for every body paragraph, I will knock you down a full letter grade. If you don't use quotes in every body paragraph, I will fail you. Without reading the paper, I will look and see if there are quotes in every single body paragraph. If they are not, you have to use at least one in every body paragraph. That is my rule. If you have not done so, I will fail the paper automatically. So, don't do that. Write correctly. Learn how to write at a college level. There are a number of reasons that writing is so important, and I'm not going to go into all of them now, but one of the reasons is that writing reflects thinking. The more organized our writing, the more organized our thinking. When we're dealing with difficult college-level topics and subjects, our thinking needs to be very ordered, very rational. Most students do not have this skill yet. So you need to acquire it. And writing in an organized way will aid you in this acquisition. So I expect to see it done. Now, as I say, the introduction. An introduction must be funneled. It will begin with a broad statement that references the biggest theme of the paper, and every statement thereafter will become more specific. Always include title and author of the text on which you're writing in the intro paragraph. I will look for this. If I do not see the full name, first and last name, of the person on which you're writing, and the full name of their text in the introductory paragraph, I will knock your grade down. It's written right there. It's in the writing checklist. I'm talking about it. Therefore, there is no legitimate reason to leave this out. Remember, this is an introduction for a reader to what you're going to be telling them about. What if they would like to go and get the book and see what you're talking about? You have to let them know what you're talking about, what text you're discussing. So I'm making this lecture video, by the way, for more than one class, so I'm trying not to be too specific about content because it won't make sense to half of you who are watching this. But if you're writing on René Descartes, then I expect to see this in the introductory paragraph of every single paper. The Discourse on Method by René Descartes claims that blah, 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 blah. Or René Descartes, in his Discourse on Method, says blah, 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 or whatever. But I expect to see first and last name, title of the text. What's the other paper topic? Oh my gosh. Is it on Hobbes? No. Hang on. Let me see what the other paper topic is for my other class. For half of you. Because I suddenly don't remember it all. Paper 1. Oh, it's on Hobbes. That's right. So you have to choose one of the questions on Thomas Hobbes. So in the introduction then, I expect to see you having said, in Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, he says blah, 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 or whatever. So this is the rule. This is the rule, and everybody has to follow it, and there are no exceptions. There are no exceptions to this rule in writing. The first time you mention someone's name, an important person, in your paper, you use first and last name. So I should see René Descartes and Thomas Hobbes. Every time thereafter, you use only the last name. You do not reference important people by their first names. You guys aren't buddies. That's disrespectful. These are academic elites. They are important, famous human beings. You must use last name only. You first provide the first and last name. Every time thereafter, last name only. I expect to see all of this. If I do not, heads will roll, as it were. Now, let me go back to this here. Okay. So, we'll see when we look at my sample paper. I've written a sample, so you'll see how I funnel an introduction in my sample paper. Then, the thesis statement. A direct claim about the topic, which you must prove in your essay. It is usually found at the end of your introduction, most specific statement, etc., etc., etc. Okay, fine. You'll see what I've done with my thesis statement and introduction in my sample paper. So the body, the middle part of your essay where you support and develop your thesis. This is my rule. This is not everybody's rule, but it's a rule that you really should follow in the humanities. Any other time you take a course in the humanities, so English, philosophy, social sciences, history, literature, whatever, you should just generally follow this rule anyway. Each body paragraph. So body paragraphs are everything that are not the introduction and conclusion. The first paragraph of your paper is an introduction. The last paragraph of your paper is a conclusion. Everything in the middle is a body paragraph. In every single body paragraph, you must use at least one direct quotation from the text with accompanying explanation of the quote itself and commentary. We'll talk about that when we get to quotes. And you have to provide a page number for all quotations. Citations are mandatory. So I expect to see in everybody's paper, after every single quote, in parentheses, a page number from our texts. Or, when you're writing on Descartes, since, as I said, in the online excerpt from the piece, I want to see paragraph numbers, okay? So you can do that easily, but I expect to see a citation for every quotation. No, you do not need to provide a works cited page. I know what pieces you're using. I'm very hard on writing, and I want students to write well, but I'm way too lazy to go through and correct works cited pages. You can do that in an English class. I'm not going to do it here. I know what text you're using because you are not to use any internet sources. You are not to use any other sources but our textbooks. These are not research papers. These are not papers about what you think about a topic. I don't care what you think. Nobody cares what you think at this level. Here's what we care about. If you can read difficult texts, understand them, and explain them back to me. That's the first step. Nobody has any business critiquing or judging or putting forth an opinion about anything until he has exhibited a thorough and correct comprehension of the material. As such, you will notice that none of my paper topics ask you to critique or evaluate in any sense. You are only to explain what the person has said. And believe you me, having studied philosophy for 14 years now, I can tell you with no amount of uncertainty that it is quite a feat to be able to just explain what a philosopher has said. We've been trying to understand what Plato has been saying for 2,500 years. 2,500. And people still don't completely understand what Plato was saying. The first time you read Plato, you have no business critiquing him. You should only try to understand him. And the first time someone that you care about tries to tell you what they feel about something and you immediately disagree, the best thing to do is to try to understand their position first before judging them. The best thing to do when it's your enemy or somebody from a different political party or religion who is trying to put forth their ideas is to first try to understand before judging. So, in these paper topics, you will only try to understand. You will not judge. Okay? By the way, most of the time it's not that judgments I've discovered from students about important thinkers are usually flawed because they're usually based on a misunderstanding of the text. And I can easily say, oh, no. What you think he's done wrong there isn't wrong, you just don't understand this part of it. And they say, oh. So yeah, so you wasted all that energy right then. We need to just understand, first of all. So your project here is only to illustrate to me that you understand a difficult text. And like I said, that is already an incredible feat. And it is not something that I have even done thoroughly. In 14 years of studying these guys, I don't even fully understand them. So, it's okay if you don't. It's okay for you to just work on that. So, that's all we'll do. Now, a body paragraph should always include a topic sentence, etc., etc. Okay, fine. So your body paragraphs are really the meat and potatoes of your discussion. A topic sentence gives the main idea of a paragraph in the body of your essay. Now, this is funny. Just like your essay will have introduction, body, where you discuss stuff, and a conclusion, so too will each paragraph have a topic sentence or an introductory sentence, a discussion of that topic, and there should only be one per paragraph, and then a conclusion sentence, a concluding sentence. So the paper is really just a single paragraph writ large. They follow exactly the same format. If you can master this, if you can introduce information, discuss information, and conclude it with something insightful in each body paragraph, as well as the paper as a whole, it is easy for a reader to understand your thoughts. And that's precisely what you're trying to do. So, this is our task. So I will look for topic sentences and concluding sentences in every body paragraph. And I will look for at least one quotation in every body paragraph. By the way, don't even bother trying to do the thing where you just use really long quotations or something. That doesn't matter. First of all, you don't even have a page limit on these. You have paragraph limits. So make the paragraph as long as you want. If there's no content to it, it's not going to make a difference. You're still going to get a low grade. Because it doesn't matter how many pages your paper is. You have to have a certain amount of paragraphs. So don't even bother trying those tricks. And by the way, like I don't know those things. The students always think they can pull the wool over their professor's eyes. Like we don't have lots of experience dealing with student trickery. And like we weren't students. Like I didn't try the same things as an undergrad. Well, I didn't actually as an undergraduate, but I was a student too. I know what it's all about. So don't bother. Now, concrete details, all body paragraphs should have these. Quotations, facts, reasons, whatever. You'll have that. It's just a discussion. So it's fine. So commentary, by commentary, I do not mean that you say what you think about the topic of this paragraph. I specifically don't want to hear what you think. We don't care what you think. We care what you are telling me the author of the text thinks. And if you get that wrong, then that's a problem. You can either get that right or wrong. Okay? So, the point of commentary is that you explain ideas in your own words. Not that you critique the ideas. So, make sure you don't do that, because I'm not going to look fondly on that. Quotations. Now, this is important because you have to use them. And, well, there are 3 steps to the use of any quotation. So, first step, actually write out the quotation from the text. Okay? Good. Second step, explain the quotation in your own words. Unless, and I put this in here, the author's words are entirely apparent to any reader. So if the author's words are, Spot ate his dog food and got a pat on the head for doing so. Okay, you don't really have to explain that in your own words, because anybody who's going to be reading it is probably going to know what that means. But when you're explaining philosophy, nobody knows what it means. It's ridiculous. It's very difficult. That's why I made lecture videos, to try to help you understand what it means. So you will need to provide an explanation of your own words after the quotation. Now, by the way, you don't have to put these 3 elements of any quotation in this order, but it is the easiest order. So if you're really just trying to learn how to write and develop an excellent technique, it's helpful to just go in this order initially. When I write, I switch the order around, and you'll see in my sample paper that I have indeed done so. But until you develop an excellent technique, stick to this order. It's easier. The easiest thing to change about it is the first 2, the quotation and the explanation in your own words. I will often in my writing switch those around. I will make a point. I'll paraphrase basically an idea from the text, and then I'll sort of use the quote to back up what I've said the text says. Okay, so I'll say something like, Descartes wants to doubt the existence of everything around him. And then I'll provide a quote in which he says something about doubting the body in the external world. I'm sorry for those of you who aren't writing on that piece. You don't know what I'm talking about. Or I'll say, Hobbes believes that morality doesn't exist in the state of nature. And then I can quote very easily when he says, there's no sin in the state of nature, and morality only exists once a sovereign has been instituted, or something. So I can switch those around, and that's pretty easy to do. But if you're worried about getting everything correct and so forth, then, just go in the standard order. Quote, explanation of quote in your own words, explanation of the significance of the quote for your thesis, for that paragraph. This is important, this third piece, because students will often just throw quotes in, like, randomly in the middle of a paragraph, and I'm like, what does this quote have to do with what you're talking about? Why is this in there? You're just throwing in a quote just to throw in a quote. You don't even know what it means, and that's pretty clear because you didn't bother to say what it means in your own words, and it doesn't have anything to do with what you're talking about. So you're just putting it in just to put in a quote to make your paper look better, but it actually makes it look far worse because you don't know what the hell you're talking about, and that's obvious to me. So you don't want to do that. Like, you want to use quotes that have something to do with the topic of that paragraph, right? So, and you want to explain to a reader why you're putting this quote in, or this example, or whatever it is that you're quoting. Don't just assume that I will fill in the blanks for you. Here's something you've probably heard from English teachers or something that you need to not listen to, and I can't believe they don't know what the hell they're doing over there. They don't listen to this garbage. If you're a PhD student, then you can do this. If you're not a PhD student, don't do this. You are going to get a lower grade if anybody is actually grading you with standards. Don't write for an educated audience. Do not say to yourself, Denise will know what I mean. I don't really need to explain what I mean. She'll fill it in. She knows what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I probably do. I probably know why you put that quote where you did. But this is a test of your knowledge. A paper is a test of your knowledge, just like a multiple choice exam is a test of your knowledge of the material. A paper also tests your knowledge of things like grammar and punctuation and logic and critical thinking and other things like that an exam may not test. But a paper does, and I expect the burden of proof is always on you. I've done my work. I've passed all my exams and gotten my degrees. I've proven that I know what Hobbes and Descartes are saying. You now have to prove to me that you know what they're saying. And the only way to do that is by thoroughly explaining everything and pretending like you're not writing for me, who has the ability to fill in the blanks for you, but that you're writing for your mom or somebody who has not studied these guys. If you think about it in terms of writing for your mom, and in fact, if you let your mom or a friend or your sibling or somebody read your paper who hasn't read these things, that can be very helpful. They should be able, at the end of it, to say to you, I don't need to read this piece. I understand well enough your point, what your thesis is trying to prove, and that you've proven it. I understand it so well I don't need to read the piece. That's the real test. I don't write for me. I will not fill in the blanks for you. I will pretend that I am your mom reading this and that I don't know anything, assuming that your moms don't know anything about these things. I will pretend that I am that, and I will say, I don't know what this means. Why is this quote here? What does this quote mean? I don't know what he's saying. I don't know anything about Descartes. You have to teach me now. You're the teacher now, not me. You teach me. Write to teach your mother or your sibling or whomever what these guys are saying. So you need to be so thorough, so clear, that they understand the idea without having read the text. That is your job. So, don't ever think that I will fill in any information for you. Make sure that you fill in all of the information for me. Okay? Now, concluding sentences, next thing. Found at the end of each body paragraph, these sentences should provide a concise recount of the significance of the paragraph for your thesis, or it should provide a smooth transition to your next paragraph. That's harder to do, a transitional sentence. Don't worry too much about that. If you can do it, that's awesome. You'll see in my sample paper, I didn't do that. I didn't even bother trying to use a transitional sentence. I just used concluding sentences. And a concluding sentence is not just a restating of what you said, and you'll see that a conclusion is not that either. The conclusion on the full paper is not restating what you said either. A concluding sentence is not just saying what you said, but linking it back up to the big point. So a reader should always know at the end of a paragraph how that paragraph backs up your thesis. We'll see how I've done that in my sample paper. The next thing then, a conclusion. Now everybody thinks, and again, I can't believe that English teachers perpetrate this absolute nonsense, but some of them do. This is not what you do. And any person in the sciences will tell you that this is not what you do when you're writing. Because the sciences have this down. They always do this perfectly, beautifully. But in the humanities, somehow people forget that this is an important part of the discussion. Sorry. So you never do this when you're writing a paper. Say what you're going to say it, and then say what you said. That is such... Okay. I just read what you said. If you're writing a 400-page treatise on something, then yeah, you might want to, at the end of every chapter or something, recap, right? And provide a little bit of a summary of what you just said, so I can sort of remember all of it after 40 pages, and then go on to the next chapter and still be able to, look back at the main point of the last chapter easily in the conclusion. But even then, you still do one other thing, because otherwise a conclusion is just exactly your introduction. Then they become the same thing. What the hell is the point of that? That's not what a conclusion is. Don't do that stuff. Yes, you must provide a little bit of a summary. But the most important part of a conclusion is not that. It's the next step that people generally leave out in the humanities. I will be looking for this, and it is what I've said here. A conclusion should always link the claim you've been proving to the larger body of knowledge within academia. Here are potential questions to think about and respond to in your conclusion. This is the only place in this paper where it is okay. I would prefer that you don't critique, because I can almost guarantee you it's going to be based on a misunderstanding of the text. You're not even reading the full texts. You're reading excerpts. There's no way you have a full understanding of these authors. So, if you can pull out something terrific, okay, fine. But I would prefer that you give these guys the benefit of the doubt. And before you critique or judge, that you try to think about what they may have gotten right. So, here are some potential questions to which you can respond in your conclusion. Why is it important that we consider these things? Why is it important that we consider why morality exists? For those of you who are writing on Hobbes. Or why is it important that we get reasons for our beliefs instead of just blindly believing them? For those of you writing on Descartes. Are you kidding me? That's not obvious why it's important? I think it is pretty obvious. So talk about it. Talk about why it might be important that we think about these ideas, or read these ideas, or study these ideas, or what we can get out of doing so. And by the way, I am assuming here, and, well, I'm not even assuming. I've spent 14 years thinking about these things. They are important. I am here to tell you. And I've discussed why in the lecture videos, but now I want you to talk about it. I want you to think about it. I want to see some evidence of insight or critical thinking or what have you. How can it, the ideas or whatever, or can it aid in our navigation of life as human beings? thinking about why morality exists or what its function is, how can that aid in our life as human beings? Well, given that we are moral creatures, I would think that figuring out what's going on here with morality and what it's supposed to be doing for us and why it exists in the first place probably has something to do with every single thing that happens in our daily lives, because they generally all have an ethical dimension. And the most important decisions we ever make are ethical ones. So it's probably a good idea to think about the function of morality, because if the kinds of moral decisions I make do not conduce to what morality is supposed to be doing for me or for others, then maybe I need to rethink my moral system or my moral beliefs or some of my moral decisions. Right? Might be a good idea. How is it relevant to our daily lives? Hell yes, these things are relevant to our daily lives. I am not interested in just holding a belief blindly on faith. I want reasons for why I hold that belief. And if I don't have any reasons, why the hell am I holding it? There might be a better one out there. If there's a better belief out there that's closer to some kind of truth, and I held that one instead of some obvious, ludicrous falsity, don't you suppose my life would go better? I mean, that we did not realize that the earth was round had a negative effect on navigation and travel and things. You don't want to be under a misapprehension. You want to figure out what's actually true and correct so that you can practically live better. And there are other things. How is it relevant to... this one, you can't really answer that, which is fine. That is something that... that's for higher levels of... So graduate students, or in the humanities, or sciences, or just the sciences in general. The sciences answer that one really well in their conclusions. They don't just say, here's my thesis, what I want to discuss. Here's the experiment and all the data that I got out of the experiment. And, yeah. No, they don't stop there. They say, this is really important because it denies previously long-held theories in the field of biochemistry or whatever. What I've done is important because we used to think this. I've discovered that this actually might be true, or that there's more to the story in biochemistry than, this is the way genes work. They actually seem to work this way instead. Scientists, people in the sciences do that wonderfully in their conclusions. We need to do that too. So I want to see it done. Why should anyone read or care about your essay or the text on which it's based? Okay, so I want to see something like that happening. Now, go back to modules, and here's my writing sample. So, for those of you in my Intro to Ethics class, you'll read some Aristotle next, actually, after we're done with Hobbes this week. You'll be reading Aristotle, so you'll be reading all about what's going on in my sample paper. But then you can't write a paper on this topic, by the way, obviously, because then you would just copy my sample paper, and that would not work well. So for those of you who are not in that class, you're in my other class, let me just give a quick rundown of what the content is about, because then you'll be better able to understand the piece, my paper. Aristotle his discussion is about happiness. He wants to ask what happiness is. And in the paper, I say what he says happiness is, but the paper topic is actually something else. It's not asking what Aristotle says happiness is. What he does is a standard move in philosophy. Instead of just putting forth your argument, the first thing that you do is and this is what I had to do as a graduate student in philosophy. The first thing I had to do was not put forth my own philosophy. I needed to take the question and research what other philosophers had said about it, find a flaw in all of their arguments, knock them down, and then say, okay, so now we're left with nothing. We have no answer to the question, right? Because I just showed that everybody who had responded to this question hitherto was totally wrong. Oh, wait, but now I have another response, and mine is superior, because theirs are all wrong, and of course mine is right. That's what you do when you're arguing. So Aristotle, and this is very old, and philosophers still do it. I had to do it. Aristotle did it too. So Aristotle says, before I get to what I want to say happiness is, let me talk about what people usually say happiness is. They usually say it's one of these three things: pleasure, wealth, or honor. So we don't really, in this culture today, we don't really think of, there are plenty of cultures in the world that do think this still, but they're older cultures. The American culture is not that old. So honor is not what we tend to think of as being happiness, but we absolutely think that pleasure or wealth are happiness. We think that money will bring happiness, which is a whole bunch of hogwash. It doesn't work like that. So, and ancient Greeks thought the same thing. And we also think that happiness is pleasure. So if I eat plenty of cupcakes my whole life, I will have lived a happy life. Nope, doesn't seem to work like that either. You can have all the cupcakes and the drinks and the sex and the McDonald's and the whatever else that brings you pleasure that you want for your whole life. It doesn't seem like that actually brings authentic, deep happiness. And something to think about. Because if we think that money brings happiness, that the best things in life are indeed not free, like friendship and love, things that people seem to be willing to trade all their money for, then we will aim for things that are not going to bring us happiness if we don't figure out what actually brings happiness. And then we will live lives of suffering instead of happiness. So, Aristotle's project here is to knock down those three, they're not even arguments, but to knock down those three ideas that pleasure, wealth, or honor are happiness. And then after he does that in the text, he puts forth his own idea about what happiness is. So the paper topic that I'm responding to in this piece is, how does Aristotle argue against pleasure, wealth, and honor as happiness? Easy. So all I do is I have my introduction, my first paragraph about pleasure, why pleasure is not happiness, how Aristotle argues against pleasure as happiness, is split into two paragraphs because there are two separate arguments. So I put those in two paragraphs, which is no big deal. Of course, you can do that. And then two more paragraphs, one about why wealth is not happiness, then one about why honor is not happiness. And I didn't put a conclusion on this piece because I was writing it at about 3 in the morning for a class after they wrote a bunch of crappy papers, and I was angry, and I said, I'm going to show them what you're supposed to do because I'm tired of this garbage. So I did it in the middle of the night, and I was too tired to put a conclusion on. But it's really easy to put a conclusion on because I could say in the conclusion just what I was talking about. Why should we be studying Aristotle? Why should we consider the ideas of happiness? Because I want it. If I think that the way to get happiness is by getting a bunch of money, and I work so hard that I don't spend any time with family and friends because I think that money is the thing that will bring me happiness, I will end up being very unhappy because I won't have the things that really do seem to bring happiness. Family and friends, love, intellectual pursuits and challenges, spiritual endeavors. You don't need money for any of that. You don't. And those are the things that do seem to bring people real happiness, not stuff. I could be surrounded in a house full of stuff. I am surrounded in a house full of stuff. That does not mean I'm happy. And those things don't make me happy when I have no one to share them with. Other human beings make us happy. Other creatures that we love make us happy. Having some kind of meaning or purpose, having a reason to wake up in the morning, and making money is not a reason that keeps people deeply wanting to wake up in the morning. That's why it's important to study this. So there you go. There's a conclusion. Okay, I would have written it in a more eloquent fashion had I actually written it, but there's the content. Okay? Now, let's look at my funneled introduction. So, the bolded sentences here those wouldn't really be in a paper, right? Those are just writing notes for you. Okay, so in a real paper, I wouldn't have those things. So you don't need to have them either. So we'll see my funneling. My first sentence is a broad, big topic. It's not specific yet. Specifically, the topic is how Aristotle argues against pleasure, wealth, and honor as happiness. My first sentence doesn't say anything about Aristotle, him arguing against these three things as happiness. It just says something about happiness. I could have started it out with something about the ancient Greeks. That also would have been a very, very broad idea that I could have narrowed down further. I could have started out with the idea that people live their lives in a misguided fashion or something, and it ends up causing more suffering. I could have started out with all those different kinds of things. I could have started out with something like philosophy is interested in delving into the ways in which we live so that we can live better lives. I could have started out with that because this is a philosophical concept and Aristotle is a philosopher. But the point is just pull it back further. Don't be specific. The first sentence should not be directly specific about the paper topic. I don't want to see anything in the first sentence in any of your papers about Hobbes or Descartes. I don't want to see their names. I don't want to see the title of their essay, their texts in the first sentence. I want to see something broader. For Hobbes, I mean something like something about morality is good. Something about the nature of mankind, that we're selfish. Something about freedom, whatever. Pull it back. And then for Descartes, you only have one topic that you can write on. Something about, let's see, what does he say? Not holding beliefs blindly, having reasons for our beliefs. Something about the Enlightenment, that during the Enlightenment, people were reacting against the Middle Ages when people were just superstitious and oppressed under the thumb of the church. And then, Rene Descartes, a particular Enlightenment thinker, was very adamant that we don't just follow what the church says, but that we think through what the church says or what authorities say or something. See how I pulled it back? I didn't get right into it. I started out broad, and then I got more specific. So you've got to try to do this. So, my topic, or my first sentence, the concept of happiness is one which has engendered much debate. I just mentioned happiness, but this is specifically about Aristotle's discussion of happiness, and even more deeply, Aristotle's discussion of why certain things are not happiness, certain particular things are not happiness. This paper could go a billion different directions from that first sentence, though. People are still studying happiness today, philosophers and psychologists and all kinds of different people. This paper it could have been about any of that. It could have been about, instead of Aristotle, it could have been about Plato's discussion of happiness. He has one too. Could have been about anything. So, you have no idea exactly where it's going from the first sentence, and that's the kind of first sentence you should have. Then you should get more particular, which I do. What is it exactly and how ought we to aim for it? Now, I put in those questions like that because I just said that happiness has engendered debate which means that people have questions about it. They're debating. It's not set in stone. It's not certain yet. So having those questions right after I said that makes sense. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle tackles such questions, which specifically he does, suggesting that happiness is synonymous with flourishing. That's the only portion in there that where I say what Aristotle actually says, because the question, the paper topic isn't about what he says flourishing or what he says happiness is, but how he argues against what happiness is not. And notice what I did. I didn't just, by the way, Aristotle doesn't have, oh, and I should have put in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. That's the name of the text. I should have put that in there. That's supposed to be in there. I'll change that. But the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, in his work, The Nicomachean Ethics, tackles such questions. I should have put in the title of the piece. But notice Aristotle only has the one name, so I can't do the first and last name and then every time thereafter just his last name. He just has the one name. You guys, on the other hand, are writing on two people who have first and last name. So I expect to see that rule followed. But notice what I did. I didn't just say Aristotle tackles such questions, because there are people out there who don't know who Aristotle is. Give them a little bit of contextualization. I said the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. So for Thomas Hobbes, the Enlightenment philosopher, the political philosopher Thomas Hobbes, René Descartes, the Enlightenment philosopher, the rationalist philosopher, the 17th century philosopher, something like that. Okay, some kind of contextualization. Nothing major. I do not want to see a biography, anything like that. That does not belong in there. This is not a book report in high school. No biography. That has no place in a philosophical paper. That's ridiculous. If somebody wants to know a whole bunch about these guys, they go and look them up on the internet or something, but you don't need to provide that. You need to talk about their arguments. Okay, this is a paper in the humanities, specifically on a philosophical text, so you need to talk about the philosophy, not the biography of the author, because philosophers don't care about that stuff. And maybe that's unfair, but we don't. We don't care about it. So don't put it in. So I got more specific. I said, first, this paper is going to be about happiness. And then I said, oh, by the way, this paper will be about Aristotle's discussion of happiness. And then I say, oh, by the way, this will be about what Aristotle says other people say about happiness and why it's totally wrong. So notice how I got more and more specific until I got to my thesis, most specific statement. Yet, as we'll see, there are significant logical problems with the suggestion that happiness can be equated with pleasure, wealth, or honor. And by the way, he goes through in his text pleasure, wealth, and honor in that order. I do so in my paper as well. It's always nice if you list out things, then to go on to explain them in the same order in which they were listed out. So, anyway, do that if that is relevant. Actually, it is relevant. In Descartes, I listed the order that you need to go in when you're explaining each one of the arguments. So you do need to go in that order, specifically because one argument will not stand unless the one before it stands. So that's why, of course, I think, therefore I am, only needs logical proof. You don't need another argument to make that true. So that one can stand on its own, but then the proof for God and the proof for the body in the external world require the other arguments before them. So you have to go in that order. Now, my first paragraph then is about pleasure, because pleasure, wealth, then honor. So I go in that order. So look at my topic sentence. Easy, easy, easy. Aristotle argues first against pleasure as happiness. Don't use a quote as your topic sentence. Don't use a quote as your topic sentence. Unless there's some sentence in there that's as vague and broad as mine, don't use it. It's bad technique anyway. Even if you can find one that works as a topic sentence somehow, it doesn't look good. It's terrible technique. Don't do that. Okay? always use your own words to start a topic. And don't start a page